Grace Hartley knew the banker's son was trouble the second he smiled. Folks in Redemption Creek didn't have much, but they had a sense about people. And Thomas Bradshaw's smile was all city polish, too white and too perfect for the Arizona dust. It didn't belong here. Neither did he. He'd come back from college out east, trailing the scent of money and easy living. And now at the town's harvest festival, his eyes were locked on Grace. She saw the hunger in them, a look her father, the Reverend Josiah Hartley, would have called sin itself. Grace was the preacher's daughter. 19 years of piety and propriety, her whole life lived in the shadow of the church steeple her father had built with his own two hands. Her hair was pinned tight, her dress was modest, her eyes were always downcast. That's what everyone saw. They didn't see the girl who stared out at the desert's edge, dreaming of a horizon that wasn't Redemption Creek. They didn't see the spirit her father had tried to pray out of her. But Thomas Bradshaw saw something, or he thought he did. "Miss Hartley," he said, his voice smooth as whiskey, "might I have the pleasure of a dance?" Grace glanced toward her father. He stood with the town elders, a pillar of judgment carved from unforgiving rock. I should ask my father." "Surely one dance couldn't be improper," Thomas pressed, and his smile widened. It didn't reach his eyes. Before she could answer, Mrs. Morrison, arranging pies at the refreshment table, bustled over. "Go on, dear. Young people should dance. I'll speak to your father if he has a problem." It was the push Grace needed, a small act of rebellion. The music swept them into a Virginia reel. Thomas's hand was warm on hers, his movements practiced and graceful. He was handsome. She couldn't deny it. But the way he looked at her made her skin crawl. "You're different from the other girls here," he murmured, pulling her a little too close. A rose among thorns. His grip on her hand tightened. "Meet me later, by the old well behind the church. I have something to tell you." "I couldn't possibly." "Please, Grace, just for a moment." His eyes were insistent, almost desperate. "I leave on business tomorrow. It's important." The dance ended. Grace fled back to the safety of the refreshment table, her heart hammering. She served punch with trembling hands, trying to forget his request. It was foolish. It was dangerous. But as the crowd thinned and the lanterns cast long shadows, she found her feet moving, almost against her will, toward the old well. She told herself it was just to say no, to refuse him properly, where no one could see. A final, firm rejection. But a part of her, the part that dreamed of the horizon, was just a little bit curious. That was her first mistake. The well was hidden in a stand of cottonwoods, swallowed by darkness. "I knew you'd come." Thomas's voice sliced through the silence. He stepped out of the shadows, that satisfied smile back on his face. She could smell the whiskey on his breath now. "I shouldn't be here," she said, her voice a nervous whisper. "My father. Your father need never know." He moved closer, crowding her against the cold stone of the well. "Grace, I had to tell you. You've captured my heart. Mr. Bradshaw, I must go." She tried to turn, but he grabbed her arm. His grip was like iron. "One kiss," he demanded, his voice losing its smooth edge. "Just one to remember you by." "No!" She twisted, trying to wrench free. He held on tight. There was a sharp, tearing sound as the fabric of her sleeve ripped. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet night. She stumbled backward, her hair tumbling from its severe pins. He laughed, a low, ugly sound. "Playing coy. Everyone knows preachers' daughters are the wildest ones." The insult hit her harder than a slap. All her life, she'd lived under the weight of that title. The perfect, pious preacher's daughter. And he spat it at her like a curse. Rage, cold and pure, surged through her. She slapped him. The crack echoed in the night air. For a second, he just stared, his hand on his cheek, surprise turning to pure fury in his eyes. He released her arm. "You'll regret that," he snarled. Grace didn't wait to hear another word. She ran. She fled through the darkness, her torn sleeve flapping, her hair streaming behind her like a banner of her shame. She burst through the back door of the parsonage and flew up the stairs to her room, locking the door behind her. Her heart hammered against her ribs so hard she thought it might break. From her window, she watched him stalk back toward the lights of the festival, his shoulders rigid with anger. Her hands shook too badly to mend the dress or fix her hair. She just crawled into bed, pulling the quilts up to her chin, and prayed her father wouldn't check on her when he came home. But Grace Hartley was about to learn that some prayers go unanswered, and some nightmares are only just beginning. The next morning, the world was cold and brittle. Grace came downstairs to the sound of voices in the parlor, her father's low rumble and a woman's high and urgent. "Found her hair ribbon by the well," Mrs. Bradshaw was saying, "and Thomas has such terrible scratches on his face. He wouldn't say anything, the perfect gentleman, but I pressed him." Grace froze on the stairs, her blood turning to ice. "He finally admitted it, Reverend. Your daughter. She arranged to meet him. She threw herself at him. When he refused her advances, she attacked him like a wild animal." Silence. A terrible, heavy silence that pressed down on Grace, suffocating her. She waited for her father to roar, to defend her honor, to throw the woman out. Instead, she heard his voice, quiet and deadly. "Bring her to me." She stood before him in his study. The morning sun streamed through the window, making the dust motes dance like tiny mocking angels. "Is it true?" His voice was a whip crack in the still room. "Father, he lied. He grabbed me. He tore my sleeve. Look." She showed him the tear, the proof of her struggle. His eyes, cold as winter stone, flickered from the fabric to her face. "You went to meet a man, alone, at night. To tell him no. You have shamed me." He bit out each word. "You have shamed this house. You have shamed God. You believe them? Over your own daughter?" The floor felt like it was tilting beneath her feet. "I believe the evidence," he hissed. "I believe a respected Christian family, and I believe the devil has found a home in your heart." He stood towering over her. "You will confess your sin before the congregation on Sunday. You will fast and pray until then. You will beg for forgiveness." "I have nothing to confess," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I am innocent." "Pride," he sneered. "You will confess, or you will no longer be welcome in this house." For 3 days her room was a prison, bread and water, and the suffocating weight of his judgment. From her window she saw the town whispering. Her best friend Lily Stewart tried to visit, but her father turned her away at the door. Grace saw the relief on Lily's face as she hurried away. The poison had spread. Everyone believed the lie. Sunday came like a death sentence. Her father waited at the bottom of the stairs. "Have you prepared your confession?" "I have prepared to speak the truth." His hand cracked across her face. The blow sent her stumbling against the wall, her cheek blazing. "You will confess," he said, his voice terrifyingly calm, "or I will cast you out before them all." The church was packed, not for worship but for a spectacle, an execution. Thomas Bradshaw sat with his family, a few faint scratches on his cheek, a smirk playing on his lips. He was the victim. She was the sinner. Her father took the pulpit. "Brethren," he began, his voice ringing with sorrow, "we gather today because sin has crept into our midst. My own daughter, my own flesh and blood, has fallen. She pursued a young man, and when he righteously refused her, she attacked him like a Jezebel of old." "That's a lie!" The words erupted from Grace before she could stop them. A collective gasp swept through the church. "Silence, woman!" her father thundered, his face flushing a deep, angry red. "This is a house of truth," Grace cried, stepping forward, her fear burning away into a desperate, furious courage. "Thomas Bradshaw is the liar. He attacked me." The room exploded into chaos. Mrs. Bradshaw shrieked about slander. Men rose from their seats. "Enough!" Reverend Hartley's voice boomed over the noise, a sound like the wrath of God. He pointed a trembling finger at his daughter. "Grace Hartley, you are no longer my daughter. You are no longer welcome in this church or in this home. Go, and take your sins with you." The silence that fell was absolute, total. She looked from face to face, faces she had known her entire life. She searched for a flicker of belief, a hint of sympathy. She found nothing, not even from Lily. With the last of her dignity, she turned and walked down the aisle. The congregation parted for her like the Red Sea. As she reached the door, she heard a woman whisper loud enough for all to hear. The preacher's daughter, shamed. Outside, the sun was merciless. She stood on the church steps, alone with nothing. No money, no family, no home. The entire town had become her enemy. Sheriff Watson appeared at her side. "Move along, girl. You're disturbing the peace." "Where am I supposed to go?" she whispered. "Not my concern." He was in the Bradshaw's pocket, she realized. Of course he was. She walked down Main Street, a ghost in her own town. The general store owner flipped his sign to closed as she approached. Mothers pulled their children inside, away from her corrupting presence. By nightfall, she had been turned away from every door. The boarding house, the hotel, even the saloon. The laughter of the drunks inside followed her out into the cold. Defeated, she found herself in the old abandoned shed behind the blacksmith's shop. It stank of horses and rot, but it was shelter. She curled up in the straw, the shame and the cold seeping into her bones. A coyote howled in the distance, and Grace Hartley, no longer the preacher's daughter, no longer anything at all, wept. She spent 2 nights in that shed, 2 days of hunger and fear. On the 3rd night, she was huddled in the shadows across from the Silver Dollar Saloon, trying to work up the courage to beg for work, when the doors burst open. 3 men stumbled out, thrown into the dust. Grace recognized them. It was Carl, the man who'd mocked her in the saloon, and his friends. Following them out was a figure cloaked in shadow and menace. He was tall, dressed in black from his boots to his flat-crowned hat. A long duster coat swirled around him like smoke. He moved into the lamplight, and Grace saw a face that looked like it had been carved from the same rock as the mountains. A hard jaw, dark stubble, and eyes that held a storm. Twin Colts were tied low on his hips. He was a gunslinger. "I told you to apologize to the lady," he said, his voice a low rumble. "She ain't no lady," Carl slurred, wiping blood from his nose. "She's the preacher's daughter what got cast out for." He never finished the sentence. The stranger's fist moved like lightning, and Carl dropped into the dust. The other 2 scrambled away into the night. The stranger watched them go. Then he turned, and his eyes found her in the shadows as if he'd known she was there all along. "You can come out," he said. His voice wasn't threatening. It was calm. "They won't be bothering you again." She stayed pressed against the wall, her heart hammering. He studied her for a long moment. He saw the straw in her hair, the dirt on her dress, the hunger in her eyes. "When's the last time you ate?" The question was so direct, so unexpected, she answered without thinking. 3 days ago." He muttered a curse under his breath, then called toward the saloon. "Murphy, bring out a plate of stew and some coffee." "I can't pay," she said quickly. "Didn't ask you to." He leaned against a porch post, keeping his distance. "Name's Jake Harland." The name hit her like a physical blow. She'd seen the posters. Wanted for bank robbery, horse theft, murder. Jake Harland. "Yes," he said, reading her expression. "That Jake Harlan." Yet here he was, defending her, offering her food. The bartender Murphy brought out a tray and set it on a barrel near her, then scurried back inside. The smell of the hot stew was dizzying. "Eat," Jake said, turning his back to give her privacy. She ate like a starving animal. When she was done clutching the warm coffee cup, she found her voice. "Why?" He didn't turn around. "Maybe because I know what it's like to have lies told about you. Maybe because I was in the back of that church on Sunday." Her breath caught in her throat. "You were there?" "Came to town for supplies. Figured I'd hear a sermon. Remind myself what faith used to feel like." He turned then, and the storm in his eyes had been replaced by a strange gentleness. "What I saw in there wasn't faith, Miss Hartley. It was a lynching without a rope. And I saw your face. That wasn't the face of a guilty woman. After 3 days of being condemned by everyone she knew, the one person who believed her was a wanted outlaw. The irony was so thick she could taste it. He lied, she said, the words spilling out. Thomas Bradshaw. He attacked me, and when I fought back, he twisted the whole story. I know, Jake said. It was just 2 words, but they were the anchor she'd been desperate for. Just then, The saloon doors swung open again. Sheriff Watson stepped out, his hand resting on his gun. "Harland," he said, his voice tight with a mixture of fear and bravado. "Got a lot of nerve showing your face here." "Just passing through, Sheriff," Jake said, his voice easy, relaxed. Watson's eyes slid to Grace. "With her, I see. One outcast finds another." "Careful, Sheriff," Jake's voice dropped, losing its warmth. "I don't take kindly to men who insult women." Men began to gather in the street, drawn by the confrontation. She saw faces from the church, their expressions hard and righteous. "The preacher's daughter and the outlaw!" someone shouted. "Sin calls to sin." "She is innocent," Jake's voice cut through the murmurs, loud and clear for all to hear. "And unlike you hypocrites, I've got the courage to say it to her face." "A killer vouching for her?" Mrs. Patterson sneered, pushing to the front of the crowd. "I may be a thief, ma'am," Jake said, tipping his hat, "but I never stole a woman's good name, and every man I killed was facing me with a gun. Can your precious Thomas Bradshaw say the same?" The crowd roared. A bottle shattered at Jake's feet. He didn't even flinch. "Get out of my town, Harland," Watson yelled. "Both of you. Him for his crimes and her for vagrancy." "Vagrancy?" Jake laughed, a bitter, ugly sound. "After her own father threw her to the wolves? After every Christian in this town slammed the door in her face? You people make me sick." He turned to Grace. "Come on, let's get you somewhere safe. I have nowhere to go." "You do now." He offered his arm, and she took it. They walked right through the middle of the mob. No one dared touch them. At the edge of town, two horses were waiting, a powerful black stallion and a gentle-looking mare. "She's yours," Jake said, nodding to the mare. "Bought her this morning." "This morning, before you even met me?" He shrugged. "Had a feeling a storm was coming. Figured someone might need a way to ride it out." He helped her mount, then took off his long duster coat and handed it to her. It was warm and smelled of leather and the wild. For the first time in days, she felt safe. As they rode out into the desert night, she took one last look back. The church steeple was a black finger pointing at a sky full of cold, indifferent stars. It wasn't home anymore. It was a tombstone for the girl she used to be. The desert stretched out before them, vast and dangerous. But for the first time in her life, it didn't look like an ending. It looked like freedom. They rode until the lights of Redemption Creek were a forgotten memory. The desert, which had always seemed like a barrier, now felt like a sanctuary. As dawn broke, Jake led her into a hidden canyon, a sliver of green life carved into the red rock. A small, rough cabin was tucked away by a spring. "It ain't much," he said, swinging down from his stallion, "but no one knows it's here." The cabin was sparse but clean. Jake immediately made a bed for himself on the floor. "You take the bed," he said, cutting off her protest. While he tended the horses, Grace looked around. There were books on a shelf, Shakespeare surprisingly, and tacked to the wall, a wanted poster, his own. The drawing was grim, capturing his danger but none of the kindness she'd seen. "Keeps me humble," he said from the doorway. "Reminds me of what the world sees." "What did you do?" she asked softly. "The poster says you killed a man in Tucson." He built a fire in the stone hearth, his movements efficient and sure. "Name was Wade Thornton. What the poster doesn't say is that Thornton had just beaten his wife to death. I tried to stop him. He drew on me." His voice was flat, matter of fact. "The only witness was his brother, the sheriff. So I became a murderer." "And the robberies? Some true, some not. Once you're an outlaw, every crime in 3 territories gets your name tacked onto it. I've robbed banks that were foreclosing on good folks. Never took from anyone who couldn't spare it." He looked at her, and his eyes were serious. "You're not what I expected a preacher's daughter to be." "And you're not what I expected an outlaw to be," she countered. "I suppose I'm not a preacher's daughter anymore. I don't know what I am." "You're alive," he said simply. "For now, that's enough." A strange peace settled between them in that hidden canyon. He taught her how to survive in the wild, how to read the signs of the land. She found she had a knack for it, a resilience she never knew she possessed. In the evenings, they talked. She told him about her dreams of seeing the ocean, of a life bigger than the one her father had planned for her. "My father tried to pray the spirit out of me," she confessed one night by the fire. Thank God he failed, Jake muttered. The words hung in the air between them. 4 nights they had peace. On the 5th, it was shattered by the sound of hoofbeats. Jake was on his feet in an instant, guns in his hands, pushing her behind him. Get down! Harland! A familiar voice called out. I know you're in there. Come out peaceful. It was Sheriff Watson, and he wasn't alone. What do you want, Sheriff? Jake yelled back. You took something that didn't belong to you. The girl's father wants her back, says he's willing to forgive her if she returns. Grace grabbed Jake's arm. The thought of going back, of being under her father's thumb again, was more terrifying than any outlaw. Please don't let them take me. Not a chance, he whispered. Then louder, Miss Hartley is a grown woman. She goes where she pleases. She's been led astray, Watson shouted. Her father is offering you a deal, Harlan. Send her out, and we ride away. No one has to die. Grace's heart sank. A deal. He was an outlaw, a pragmatist, a man who survived. Here's my counteroffer, Jake yelled. You turn around and forget you ever found this place. Can't do that. The Reverend's put up a bounty, $500 for her safe return. $500. It was a fortune. Enough to set a man up for a new life. Jake was quiet for a long, terrible moment. Grace held her breath, her world hanging in the balance. Was this it? Was this his price? Then he laughed. It was a low, dangerous sound that sent a chill down her spine. Watson, he called out, his voice dripping with contempt. You could offer me $5,000, and the answer would be the same. The lady said no. The world exploded in gunfire. Bullets tore through the thin walls of the cabin. Jake shoved her to the floor, returning fire through a broken window. Splinters flew through the air. There's a loose board in the back, he yelled over the din. Get to the horses. Go. I'm not leaving you. This is no time to argue, he roared. But then his eyes met hers, and for a split second, the outlaw vanished. I'll be right behind you. I promise. She scrambled through the opening as Jake's guns answered the posse's. She fumbled with the saddles, her hands shaking. Gunshots echoed off the canyon walls. Then he was there, blood staining his sleeve. You're hurt. It's a graze. Mount up. They rode out of that canyon like demons were on their heels, Jake leading her through trails that didn't exist on any map. Behind them, she could hear the frustrated shouts of Watson and his men. They rode for hours, pushing the horses, pushing themselves until the sun was high in the sky and the canyon was miles behind them. He finally slowed their pace high in the pine-covered hills. Let me see your arm, she demanded. He submitted as she tore a strip from her petticoat to clean and bandage the wound. It was just a graze, as he'd said, but it was a stark reminder of how close they had come. They'll keep coming, he said, his face grim. Your father. He's more stubborn than I thought. Then we keep running. Grace, he said, catching her hand. This is my life, running and hiding. It's no life for you. What life do I have to go back to? She shot back, her voice fierce. The preacher's daughter is dead. She died in that church. You're the only person in this world who believed me. The only one who saw the truth. If that's not worth fighting for, I don't know what is. A slow smile spread across his face. All right then, but no more running blind. We're going to disappear. He told her of a place, far to the north, a settlement where people didn't ask questions, a place to lay low. He won't give up, she said quietly. My father would rather see me dead than see his reputation stained. Then we'll make sure he never finds you, Jake said, and his voice was a vow. As they rode on, Grace felt a change. It wasn't just gratitude anymore. It was something deeper, forged in gunfire and loyalty. Jake, she said softly, thank you for claiming my innocence. He glanced back at her, his guard completely down. Grace, I'd face down every lawman in the territory to keep you safe. And in that moment, an outcast and an outlaw riding through a dangerous land, she felt safer than she ever had in her father's house. But their fight was far from over. Her father's pride was a powerful and terrible thing, and he had just raised the stakes. The news hit them like a physical blow. They were in a dusty trading post, miles from anywhere, when Jake saw the poster. It was new, the ink still fresh. Reverend Josiah Hartley had put a bounty on his own daughter, not for her return. The poster read, $1,000 for Jake Harlan, dead or alive. $500 for the girl, Grace Hartley. She is to be considered armed and dangerous, corrupted by the outlaw. Return her by any means necessary. By any means necessary, Grace whispered, the words chilling her to the bone. It was a death warrant. Her own father had signed it. He's not trying to save you anymore, Jake said, his voice grim. He's trying to silence you. Now, every desperate man with a gun would be hunting them. They pushed north into the brutal, unforgiving desert. The sun was a hammer, the wind a razor. Days blurred into a nightmare of heat and dust. On the 5th day, they ran out of water. The spring Jake had been leading them to was nothing but cracked mud and sun-bleached bones. The horses were suffering, and Grace felt her own strength failing. We have to turn back, Jake said, his jaw tight. We can't, she argued. They'll be watching the main trails. We'd be riding right into a trap. He looked at the horizon, his eyes narrowed in calculation. There's one other place, an old Apache waterhole. Sacred ground. Most men won't go near it. Cursed, they say. Do you believe in curses? I believe in water, he said. They traveled by night, walking to spare the last of the stallion's strength. Grace's mare had already collapsed from exhaustion, and they'd been forced to leave her. Each step was agony. Her town-made boots were falling apart on the sharp rock. Near dawn they heard it, horses moving fast. Down, Jake hissed, pulling her behind a boulder. A posse of 6 riders thundered past, their faces hard and cruel. Grace recognized the leader, Bill McCready, a bounty hunter with a reputation for being more of an executioner. They can't be far, McCready's voice drifted back to them. The Reverend wants the girl back, but he ain't particular about her condition. Their ugly laughter echoed as they disappeared into the rocks. Grace and Jake stumbled on, driven by fear and thirst. The sun rose and the world became a shimmering, white-hot hell. Just when she thought she was going to die, Jake pointed. Ahead, a slash of impossible green, a hidden canyon. Water. They practically fell down the rocky slope. The spring was small, but it was real. As Jake filled their canteens, he pointed to symbols carved on the rocks. Apache signs. We're guests here. Just then, a figure seemed to materialize from the shadows. An old Apache man, his face a map of the desert itself. Harlan, the old man said. Joseph, Jake replied with a nod of respect. Joseph's eyes, ancient and wise, turned to Grace. This is the one they hunt, the preacher's daughter. Not anymore, Grace said, her voice stronger than she felt. I am my own woman now. A rare smile touched Joseph's lips. Good. The ones who follow you will not find this place. The desert confuses those with evil in their hearts. They rested for a day under Joseph's protection. He told them of a settlement deep in the Colorado mountains, a place of sanctuary. As they prepared to leave, he gave Jake a solemn warning. Your fight is not just with bounty hunters. The preacher has sent word to other churches. He has called his daughter a demon, a corrupter of souls. There are men who hunt you now, not for money, but for God. Her father had turned her into a monster in the eyes of the faithful. A holy war had been declared on her. The McCready gang found them 2 days later. They were ambushed at dawn. Gunfire exploded from the rocks around them. Jake shoved her behind a fallen log as bullets ripped the air apart. They were pinned down, outnumbered. Give it up, Harlan, McCready yelled. Send the girl out, and I'll let you die quick. I'm the one you want, Grace cried out, stepping into the open. Let him go. Grace, no, Jake yelled, but more gunfire drove him back to cover. I think I'll take you both, McCready sneered, raising his rifle. That's when Grace remembered the derringer Jake had given her, tucked into her boot. For last chances, he'd said. Her hand was steady. Her aim was true. She had never fired a gun in her life, but in that moment, she was not the preacher's daughter. She was a survivor. The small gun bucked in her hand. McCready cried out, clutching his shoulder, his shot going wide. In that split second of chaos, Jake exploded from cover. His Colts roared. 2 bounty hunters fell. The others, seeing their leader wounded and their odds suddenly changed, lost their nerve. They scrambled back, dragging McCready with them, and fled. Jake stood in the sudden silence, breathing hard. He looked at Grace, his face a mixture of shock and awe. "You saved my life." "You believed in mine," she replied simply. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight amid the lingering smoke of gunpowder. The woman who had been afraid to dance at a festival had just faced down a gang of killers. She had crossed a line, and she knew with a terrifying certainty that she would never be able to go back. They had to keep moving. McCready would be back, and he would be furious. As they rode toward the distant promise of the Colorado mountains, a new cold realization settled in Grace's heart. Joseph's warning echoed in her mind. Her father didn't just want her back. He wanted her erased. He had convinced himself she was a force of evil, and he would use any means and any man to see her destroyed. This was no longer about shame. It was a fight to the death. The Colorado mountains were a fortress of stone and pine, but they offered no peace. Jake grew quiet, a darkness settling in his eyes that Grace hadn't seen before. "Joseph's warning," he finally said one night as they sat by a small, smokeless fire. "Your father hasn't just hired guns. He sent letters to every church in the territory. He's painted you as a demon. There are fanatics out there, Grace. Men who believe they're on a mission from God to cleanse you." "He wants me dead," she said. It wasn't a question. "He needs you silenced," Jake corrected grimly. "Every day you're free, his lie is in danger of being exposed. He needs you under his control or in the ground." She stared into the flames, the warmth of the fire doing nothing to chase away the chill that had taken root in her soul. Her own father, her protector, her guide, the man who was supposed to love her above all else, was hunting her like an animal. In that moment, something inside her shifted. The fear that had been her constant companion burned away, leaving behind something hard and sharp. Rage. "I'm going back," she said, her voice dangerously calm. Jake tensed. "Grace, that's suicide." "No," she said, turning to face him. "Running is suicide. Hiding is suicide. This has to end. I am not his demon. I am not his sin. Thomas Bradshaw ruined my life with a lie. It's time someone told the truth about him." They spent the next 2 weeks in the mountains, but they weren't hiding. They were planning a war. Jake used his network of contacts, old outlaws and forgotten men who lived in the shadows, and they started digging into Thomas Bradshaw's past. What they found was darker than Grace could have ever imagined. It wasn't just her. There was a girl in Tucson, Maria Gonzalez, whose family was threatened with deportation by a friendly sheriff after she accused Thomas. There was a young widow in Silver City, Sarah Fleming, who fled town after he cornered her, leaving behind a terrified letter to her sister. It was a pattern, a history of predation hidden by the Bradshaw family's money and power. "How many others?" Grace whispered, her hands trembling as she read the letters Jake's contacts had secured. "We're about to find out," Jake said. They rode back to Redemption Creek under the cover of a moonless night. They didn't go into town. They made a camp in the hills, a hidden vantage point from which to launch their assault. Jake slipped into town in disguise, a ghost moving through the streets he once terrorized. He found allies in the most unexpected places. Lily Stewart, Grace's old friend, met him behind the church, her face pale with fear, but her eyes full of resolve. "I knew it was a lie," she whispered. "We all did. But we were too scared to speak. My cousin, Emma. Thomas tried the same thing with her at the summer picnic." One by one, the whispers started. Women who had been silent for years. Men who had seen things and been paid to forget. A secret army of the silenced was gathering, but the danger was growing. Jake came back one night with a split lip. "Watson's deputies," he said, "and your father. He's whipping the town into a frenzy, preaching about the devil's daughter and the man who serves her." "Let him preach," Grace said, her voice like flint. "His day of judgment is coming." The storm broke on a Sunday morning. They rode into Redemption Creek as the church bells were ringing for service. The streets were empty. Everyone was in her father's church. Perfect. The heavy doors crashed open. Every head in the church turned. Grace walked down the center aisle, Jake at her side. Her father stood frozen at the pulpit, his mouth open mid-sermon. "Speaking of me, Father?" Grace's voice rang out, clear and strong. Perhaps I should give my own testimony. The congregation erupted. Sheriff Watson and his deputies moved to block them. Jake's hand drifted to the butt of his Colt. It was all the warning they needed. Let her speak. It was Lily Stewart standing up in her pew. She has no rights here, her father thundered. On what charges? Grace called back, never stopping her advance. Is it a crime now to defend yourself against a predator? She reached the front of the church and turned to face them all. Thomas Bradshaw sat with his family, his face ashen. I stayed silent once, Grace said, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. We all did, and our silence allowed a monster to walk among us? She held up the letters. Maria Gonzalez, Sarah Fleming, Emma Morrison, Catherine Bell. Should I go on? Should I read their words? Their accusations against the gentleman you all protect? Lies, slander, Mrs. Bradshaw shrieked. Then let him deny it, Grace challenged, her eyes locking onto Thomas. Let him stand before God and deny what he did to these women. Thomas stammered, his smooth words gone. Then Emma Morrison stood, her voice shaking but clear. It's true. He cornered me. If my brother hadn't come. Her words were cut off by a sob. Then another woman stood, and another. Silent witnesses, their presence a damning accusation. You have corrupted them with your lies, her father stammered, pointing at Grace. The only lie told in this church was yours. Jake's voice cut like a knife. When you cast out your own daughter to protect a predator, an outlaw's word means nothing, Watson blustered. Maybe not, Jake said. But what about theirs? He gestured to the women now standing all over the sanctuary. Are they all liars, Sheriff? Or is it possible the real corruption has been hiding in the front pew all along? You can't prove anything, Thomas finally shrieked. It's their word against mine. The crack of Jake's gun was deafening. The bullet slammed into the wood of the pew, inches from Thomas's hand. The church went deathly silent. Choose your next words carefully, boy, Jake said, his voice deadly soft. You're talking about the woman I love. The woman I love. The words hit Grace with the force of a physical blow. He had never said it, not in all their nights by the fire, not in all their desperate escapes. He said it now, here, for the whole world to hear. You love this fallen creature? Her father whispered, his face a mask of horror. I love a woman who survived the desert, fought off killers, and had the courage to come back here and face down the men who tried to destroy her, Jake said, his eyes never leaving the reverence. If that makes her fallen, then I'll take fallen over your kind of righteousness any day. The church doors opened again. More women filed in, drawn by the commotion, their faces set. The dam of silence had broken. Thomas Bradshaw saw it. He saw the faces of the men in town, the fathers and brothers of the women he'd victimized, turning on him. He bolted for a side door, but his way was blocked. The town had turned. Thomas Bradshaw, Sheriff Watson said, finally seeing which way the wind was blowing. You're under arrest. As his deputies led a sputtering Thomas away, Reverend Hartley stumbled down from his pulpit. He stood before Grace, and for the first time he truly saw the woman she had become. I was wrong, he choked out. God forgive me, I was wrong. Grace looked at the broken man who was her father. I forgive you, she said, but I can't come back. She took Jake's offered arm, and they walked out of that church, leaving the ruins of their old lives behind them. In the bright morning sun, Grace took a deep breath of free air. So, Jake said, his hand finding hers, where to now? She looked up at the man who had saved her, the outlaw who had shown her the meaning of honor. Wherever we want, she said, and for the first time, it was the truth. The trial was a storm that shook the Arizona territory. The Bradshaw family threw all their money and influence into it, hiring lawyers from back east, trying to paint Grace and the other women as harlots and liars. But they hadn't counted on the truth, and they hadn't counted on Jake Harland. Grace took the stand, not as a shamed girl, but as a woman forged in the desert. She told her story, her voice clear and unwavering. Then Emma testified. Then Sarah Fleming's sister read her letter aloud, her voice trembling with rage. One by one, the stories built a wall of evidence that no amount of money could tear down. But the final blow came from an unexpected source. Reverend Josiah Hartley took the stand. He confessed everything. His pride, his blindness, his terrible sin of choosing reputation over his own daughter. "The truth shall set you free," he said, his voice heavy with a broken man's wisdom. "My daughter chose freedom. In doing so, she taught me the true meaning of faith." Thomas Bradshaw was found guilty. The verdict was more than just a legal victory, it was a revolution. The power of a wealthy name had been broken by the courage of silenced women. Grace and Jake left Phoenix and headed west, toward the ocean she had always dreamed of. They weren't alone. Emma Morrison rode with them, and a few of the other women, all seeking a new start. Even her father traveled with them for a time, a humble man seeking his own kind of redemption at a small mission in California. They found a home in a small town on the California coast. Jake used the money he'd gathered over the years, not from robbing the poor, but from redistributing the wealth of corrupt railroad barons and bankers, to buy a small ranch. He received a pardon from the governor, trading his guns for a quiet life. The outlaw found peace. They were married in a garden overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Her father performed the ceremony. As the sun set, casting a golden path across the water, Jake turned to her. "No regrets?" Grace looked at the man she loved, at the endless ocean before them. She thought of the girl who had been cast out, left to die. She thought of the woman she had become. "Every cruel word," she said, her voice soft. "Every cold night in the desert. Every moment of fear. It all led me here, to you. How could I regret the path that brought me home?" The preacher's daughter had been shamed, cast out, and hunted. But the woman who emerged from the fire had claimed more than just her innocence. She had claimed her voice, her strength, her freedom. And in a world full of lies, she had found a truth worth fighting for. The greatest truth of all. Thank you for listening to this story of love, justice, and redemption. If you enjoyed this tale, please let us know where you're listening from in the comments below. We love hearing from our audience all around the world. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next story from the wild heart of the American West. What did you think of Grace's journey? Share your thoughts. We'd love to hear your perspective.